because of recent news, and I didn't realize he actually had. I suppose part of getting you in the business in the first place was Don Kernodle, who just recently passed. Could you tell me more about Don?
He did, and I was honored to be one of the main speakers at his celebration just recently. In fact, I was there. Sergeant Slaughter was there, who was a pallbearer for Don, and they were the best of friends, long time friends. Long before I came along, they have been friends. And the family, his brother Wally, Don had always asked me to speak at his service, when he passed. And so I feel very honored to have been a part of that. And it went really, really well. I mean, we honored him. We just celebrated his wrestling career. Like I shared that day with Sarge sitting there, Sarge and Don Kernodle get 100% of the credit for Nikita Koloff. In other words, if it wasn't for Sarge and Don, Nikita Koloff would have never been born. I would not have existed. And as the story goes, the short version, Don and Sarge were driving from, I think, maybe Charleston, South Carolina to Savannah, Georgia one night after a match. And on their way to the next town, grabbed a notebook and started writing out a whole storyline for a nephew for Ivan Koloff. And they approached Jim Crockett with the idea. He loved it. He said, well, if you can find a guy. So Don then approached a guy named Road Warrior Animal. I'm sure some of your viewers, listeners may be familiar with that name.
Every single one, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah, Road Warrior Animal, and just asked this question: do you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian? That was the question. And Animal's like, I know the guy right now. So he made a phone call to me. I made a 5-minute phone call to Jim Crockett Jr., made sure he understood I had no amateur wrestling background, no professional training, had never been in a ring. And he said he understood, told me what day to be in his office with my head shaved. I showed up the day he said to be there, which, by the way, this is way before selfies or anything like that, right? So he didn't even have a picture of me. He didn't even know what I looked like. We just had a 5-minute conversation. And I showed up the day he said to be there, and that was my introduction to Don Kernodle. That was the first day I met him and Ivan. And Nikita Koloff was born in the hallways of Charlotte in June of 1984. Him and Sarge get all the credit for the concept. They were the brainchild behind the idea. And then Don and Ivan, believe it or not, the next 2 or 3 months, because I had no experience or no training, I did actually debut on television the next night in Raleigh, Dorton Arena. Fortunately, it was only an 11-second match. But Don and Ivan would get to the towns. We get to the towns early the next 2 or 3 months. You might say I had on-the-job training because Don and Ivan would bump and thump all over the ring for me, teach me the mechanics of wrestling before the matches. And then on the way home, the three of us would talk about the old school psychology of wrestling. And that's how I learned the business. So Don and Ivan get all the credit for teaching me the business. Don and Sarge get the credit for Nikita Koloff even existing.
So did you know Don really well? Because I know he wasn't there too long before he exited the Russian group. But I suppose really the question I really want to ask is, did you ever arm wrestle him? Because I believe he was an arm wrestling champion.
Yeah, he was like 2-time arm wrestling champion. I joked at his service the other day. I said, knowing that I was never going to sit down at a table with him and arm wrestle him. I mean, he was, he was a big guy, and he put on some weight, of course, in the latter part of his years, which is part of what led to, if you want to say the demise of his health. He was unfortunately overweight. That caused problems with his heart. But no, I wasn't about to arm wrestle the dude. I mean, he was like, he had like his arms were like steel cables, and I mean, yeah, there was no chance I was going to arm wrestle him.
Did you realise, because I know you weren't like a big wrestling fan at all, really, before getting into the business, did you realise Don's importance? Uh, I, I can't remember. It was in 1983 before the first Starrcade where he main evented with Sergeant Slaughter. Did you realise sort of like how big a part of the NWA at that time he was?
No, and in fact, knowing I was going to speak at his service, I did a little background, and I knew we had joked over the years about his amateur career at Elon University, Elon College in those days, and what's interesting is because I guess a 7-year old, he began dreaming of being a pro wrestler, and then when he went down to try out, he had to get in the ring with a guy named Bob Roop. Now, for those who don't know that name, Bob was on the 1968 Olympic wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling team in Mexico City. I mean, he was, I think they call in England, a shooter, a hooker.
Yeah, yeah.
Bob was, and as the story goes, Bob had shared with me in 2006. There's a Hall of Fame in Waterloo, Iowa, Dan Gable Museum and Hall of Fame there. He had shared with me that he remembered vividly that tryout with Don. And Don lasted longer with Bob Roop than anybody ever had. And Bob said if Don could have held in there another 30 seconds, Don would have actually defeated Roop, which was amazing. But it was that tryout that led Ole and Gene Anderson, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, to then train Don. And of course, then he did have a storied career. I mean, he won championships in Puerto Rico. I know the TV championship, the heavyweight championship, Puerto Rico. I know he wrestled many times in Maple Leaf Garden in Toronto, the Madison Square Garden. Some legendary guys, like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson's dad, Rocky Johnson, Tito Santana. He went on to win. He not only won the World Tag Team Championship with Ivan, he won it with the Sarge, and he also won it with Bob Orton Jr. So Don had a very storied career, even though it was not as highly profiled as others. He still had a great wrestling career.
And rest in peace, of course, Don. And is it Don Kernodle or Don Kernodle? How do you pronounce it?
Kernodle.